Why would a city's residents protest a large tech company that's setting up offices in their city? Find out on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. In February of this year, the City Council members in East Palo Alto signed a major agreement that allows Amazon to lease a large new office complex on a major thoroughfare in their city. Their agreement with the giant tech company and the developer of the building led to criticisms from community residents and resulted in a major protest in the city. Considering the increases that could be made to the city's tax base, which could bring an increase in the services the city could provide to its residents, why would the city's residents object? We have 3 residents to address this question and give us insights into what more the city's residents want. Seated to my left is Regina Wallace-Jones. Ms. Wallace-Jones is Chief of Staff and Head of Product Operations at eBay Inc., where she is responsible for scaling the operations product division to meet the growing demands of eBay's vast seller community. Prior to joining eBay, she partnered with the Lean In Foundation to help launch Sheryl Sandberg's book, I Am In: Women, Work, and the Will to Lead. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Electrical Engineering from Stanford University and a Master's from UCLA in Public Policy with emphasis in technology policy. Kyra Brown is seated to my immediate left. Ms. Brown is the Social Justice Program Director at Youth United for Community Action, also known as YUCA, which is a grassroots activist organization in East Palo Alto. She is a graduate of Howard University, and she describes herself as passionate about teaching young people how to utilize their civic voice. She says that her ultimate goal is to work with the oppressed and advocate for community restoring justice and equality. To my right is Elizabeth Jackson. She is a longtime guest of the show. Ms. Jackson was instrumental in starting Community Legal Services of East Palo Alto. Well, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Thank
now,
you.
I think I might have not quite said that book correctly. What's the name of it?
The name of the book is Lean In.
Yes.
Not Lean In. It talks about the women's commitment to leading through our various and unique circumstances that make us women. So it was an extraordinary experience. I'm glad I was a part of it.
Well, I tell you, you're obviously leading right now some of the community's concerns about the new building that Amazon will inhabit. Now, you would think, because, as I mentioned, the tax base that it brings to the city, that residents would be very happy. So what seems to be the problem?
So, you know, from my perspective, I would say there are multiple perspectives coming from the residents of the city of East Palo Alto. Arguably, there are some, and potentially many, who are actually excited about the prospect of Amazon joining the community as a place of business, and are excited to see new jobs come to the city, and are excited to see tech jobs come to the city. But I think, you know, what's happening in East Palo Alto is probably a microcosm of what is happening in the broader Bay Area. And for me, that means that we have concentrated an industry here, i.e. the tech industry, and concentrating industries in specific regions in the country is not unusual. I mean, we've got huge manufacturing facilities in the Midwest that are doing automotives. We've got, you know, oil and gas that's concentrated in Houston, and or the, you know, that kind of Texas rim. And Silicon Valley happens to be the place where tech companies have concentrated. The byproduct of that, I think, is that we are adding more and more individuals to the Bay Area economy that are high income earners.
Okay, now, we could follow up on that, but
Yeah.
I'm just thinking, Kyra, what does it mean for you?
So East Palo Alto has something called a first source hiring policy or ordinance. And this states that incoming companies must attempt to hire 30% of the residents of this community. And I think a lot of the outrage on the part of the Amazon and Sobrato deal in February was that Amazon failed to even attempt to hire anyone from the community. The assumption was made that folks in East Palo Alto are not engineers. No one in East Palo Alto is qualified to work at Amazon. And I think that is a slippery slope. Also, the city council accepted that Amazon did not attempt to hire residents. And I think that sends just a message that I'm not sure that the city council and Amazon are aware that they are sending. And so I think that was part of the community's outrage.
Elizabeth, you have a lot of experience in terms of first source hiring since you were hired for a job under first source hiring. So do you agree with what Kyra said about that issue being a problem for community residents?
Well, yes, of course I agree, because the reason why the first source hiring came about in the first place is it came from redevelopment starting in the 90s. And the city was undergoing a huge redevelopment, phase 1, 2, and 3. And one of the things that the community wanted at that time is really community benefits programs, and also the tax base that they were trying to establish. And so this community-based program and community benefits first source hiring was a good thing for everybody, because it offered us a chance, like she just said, the 30% to get any of the jobs that was being required from from that ordinance. And it was just in good faith. So that means that the developers who are coming in, all they had to do was to make sure they offer the jobs to East Palo Alto residents first, and then help them get the jobs. Some of the companies like IKEA did do training. They offered funds for training. And then in my case, I'm into the construction industry, and I got training from my union, and so when it was time for the hotel to come up, that was the phase.
Four Seasons.
The Four Seasons Hotel. I was accepted as in this program, and it was a really good program, because the program had monitors. We had a person that oversees the group that was in the program, and made sure that the developers look for the people that was in East Palo Alto. There was a list that we had to sign up on, so that they would know we were available, and we were trained.
Okay,
so
now,
to do the work. So my point I want to make and agree with her is that I think the city, the community needed to be upset about that, because what happened is some of the monitoring of it, the overseeing of it went away, because we went through this period where we didn't have enough of staff.
Sure,
so
now,
that's
Elizabeth.
the problem.
Yes, thank you. Elizabeth mentioned the idea of phrase community benefits. Now, while you might feel that the first source hiring policy was not being adhered to, the company had another plan. I mean, the city had agreed with with the company in terms of another plan, which represented, I guess, some community benefit. So, what was wrong with the plan? That was a substitute plan, which was to have what, an employment center.
Right.
I think that if the city of East Palo Alto is going to rewrite the rules of engagement for Amazon, I think that sets a precedent for other tech companies to come into the community to also sidestep the policy to offer money, right, which is also translated as a community benefit. And then we are still not addressing the issue of jobs for East Palo Alto residents. Amazon is bringing 1,300 jobs into the city, and 30% of that, I think, was around 390 jobs. And so I think that it was a strategy on the part of Amazon. I don't think it was a good strategy, but I mean, that's up for discussion.
Can I?
Yes.
The only reason why I just want to offer some insight here, and certainly don't want to put myself in the position of being a spokesperson for Amazon, but as a tech contributor who is daily looking at hiring pipelines and daily looking at our ability to fill the talent pipelines in our tech companies, what I know is that all of them are suffering from a tremendous shortage of talent, particularly in the very specific role of software engineer. That's where the very specific shortage is. And what I understand about Amazon's proposal is that they are going to be staffing largely software engineers in that building. I never concluded that they were trying to get out of hiring software engineers from East Palo Alto. I didn't get that read at all. What I got was a recognition that trying to concentrate 390 hires from a city that is 2 by 2 miles, when most companies are not able to fill their talent pipelines inside of the United States, right? I mean, quite a few of tech workers are coming from outside of the United States. I think that their perspective was that we're setting ourselves up to fail here, right? Because we have plenty of experience hiring, and we don't think that we're going to find 400 resources to fill that role. Just let me finish. So what I got from them was that they were making a good faith effort to do something rather than nothing, right? Because it's a best effort thing, right? It is a best, we're going to make our best effort, and if we fail, we fail. And that would be the equivalent of doing nothing. So I actually appreciated that they were thoughtful enough to come back with a proposal. And where I think the tension was with those who were disagreeing with the proposal was not so much, sure, there was the first source hiring and we want East Palo Alto residents hired, but it was also, you got a proposal and you didn't consult with us about what we wanted in the process.
Okay.
Well, I want to add to that. I think what one of the problems is that, of course, the City Council didn't communicate things to us. But I think that good faith effort, it doesn't mean that you have to change things. What could have happened there is training. Of course, we're not asking them to come up with East Palo Alto to come up with 390 people. That's unreasonable. We know it's not there, but we have programs that are going on in the city. We have organizations that are working on training youth, training residents.
Indeed.
And those kind of programs should have came up and said, let's help those programs that are in existence here. Let's be mentors. Let's be put in a program to train people how to do these tech jobs. San Francisco have tech jobs over there, and it only takes 18 months to 2 years to get to the point where you can do some of these jobs. And it's, of course, it's going to be entry-level positions. You don't expect for them to do that. And I think that's what a good faith effort is. It's a broad sense of a good faith effort. It can mean anything. As a matter of fact, I kind of like the employment office that's going to be there, but I'd like to see training also in there. And this is not a problem
Okay, now, Elizabeth.
with Amazon. And hold on just a minute. This is a problem with all the industries. I came from
All of the tech industry, or
not
all
just
of the
tech industry,
Okay.
tech industry, construction industry, all of them are having problems getting people that are trained to do their jobs.
Now,
And so
I'd like
what
to
they're
give
doing-
Kyra a
What they're
chance.
doing though, yes, but what they're doing though, they're going into these communities, starting in the elementary schools, starting in the high schools, and having the programs like apprenticeship programs, getting people prepared, getting young people prepared for the job, tech jobs, whatever they are, and they'll start doing that. That went away, but now they start doing it.
We can come back to that. Kyra, I know you probably feel very strongly, because the assumption was made that East Palo Alto wouldn't be able to come up with the number of people who would be qualified.
Right. So the policy itself says that the company must attempt to hire 30%. I did not see an attempt on the part of Amazon to hire anyone from my community. What I saw was an assumption that no one who lives there is qualified, and therein lies the problem for me. When I was younger, I used to ask my mother, this is before Barack Obama age, Mom, how come a black person has never run for president, right? And my mom used to say, you know, there are barriers in place. That's a long story. It's a pretty complicated history, right? But outside of my home, when I went to class and different things, people would tell me no one black who is qualified has run for president, right?
Now, I
And-
remember several people, African Americans, who ran for president, like Shirley Chisholm.
Shirley Chisholm.
Yes, and then Jesse Jackson
Jesse
later,
Jackson later.
who said some things were held against them. So, you know, the question is qualifications. Who decides who's qualified? And the
That's a
assumption
great-
is that if you're a person of color, you're automatically maybe not qualified, or the standards are so much higher. It used to be the standard all of a sudden was raised when we went to apply for a job. But go ahead.
Well, I guess the question, knowing that the unemployment rate for software engineers is approaching 0%, my question would be, who do we know, right, who we believe fits the qualification, who is unemployed or otherwise employed, that would be interested in going to Amazon?
Well, you know, I agree with Kyra. I didn't see any effort there. Where is the job description to see if anyone out there? We didn't see that. I mean, it didn't reach out to the community so the community can respond. So I think that's what's kind of upset the community. And we didn't have any outreach for it. When I was in the program, there was outreach for source hiring outreach, come in. We had a person to push that, and she did a good job, staff. Come in and get on the list, get some training, because the jobs are here. Now, most of these programs, first source hiring program, by the way, I'd like to say that East Palo Alto program, our ordinance is being used as a model for other cities all across the country.
Of course.
It's being used in Oakland, San Francisco, DC, Chicago, Cleveland. They're using our program as a model, and that means our program is a leader. We are a leader in this area. So obviously we know, but some people didn't even want to give us opportunity to say, you know, I want to see a job description. What are you looking for? That's what I would like to see. So
Again,
that didn't happen.
Well, it didn't happen, but I just want to make sure that we're targeting our frustration in the right place, right? If we had, for example, learned of Amazon's counterproposal and been given ample opportunity to have discussions with our city council and city staff about what we wanted, it's possible that we could have landed in a place that made everybody happy. I think because we accelerated the decision and didn't leave time for that conversation, we perhaps overlooked some outcomes that many of us are interested in.
So when you said we accelerated the
Council.
decision, you mean the city council accelerated the agreement with
Yes.
Amazon without,
Community input.
yes.
Well, and so, and to be fair, my understanding of that particular situation was that, number one, the builders had invested a fair amount in getting the building built, and were operating with the belief that once this Class A space is available, that many companies will come, except they weren't getting strong signal from many tech companies that they wanted to come.
How do we know that?
How do we know that they weren't getting
Yes,
strong signal?
yes.
That
How do we know that that wasn't a ploy to pressure the city council to take action immediately to sign that agreement?
well, whether we can validate that concern or not, let's accept for a moment that it is a valid concern.
Why?
Just for a moment, because that's actually not my point. My point is, how did we interact with that information, right? And when I say we, I mean our decision makers. How did they interact with that information? I think there may have been a little bit of fear there, right? I mean, let's be honest. There might have been some fear there.
Okay,
there
that's
might have
another
been
issue
there
for
might,
me.
Fair enough. But for whatever reason, the knowing that there was an option to walk away created fear and concern. And I think in the face of that fear or concern, we misjudged how to make the decision and how to engage with the community to get there, because there was a fear that if we take too long, this company is going to walk away.
Okay,
I would
now.
like to add something.
Yes, I want you and Elizabeth, and I know Elizabeth's going to say something that was Amazon's strategy all along, maybe something like that. But Kyra,
Okay, so I think there are three issues. I think there's the issue of a lack of community input. And when residents elect a council to represent them and then their voices are not brought into the process, that is a huge breach in trust. Secondly, there is a policy issue where a corporation sought to sidestep or proposed to sidestep a policy. And so what does that mean for the city? What does that mean for the policy? What does that mean for other tech companies who want to come into East Palo Alto or other low-income areas? Did our city council set a precedent where tech companies, because they have money, can sidestep policy? Also, the third issue was the timing, right? My understanding is that the city council was asked to make a decision the same night, right, regarding Amazon's presence in East Palo Alto. And should the council have said no, Amazon/Sobrato said that they would leave the city. So to me, that sounds like a threat, right?
yes, but tell me something. How could they leave the city? Maybe Amazon, but
Correct.
Sobrato has that building there that it has to rent. So it would be going out seeking another client.
Correct.
Okay, so maybe that was a part of their strategy. So even if the Sobrato building is staying there, Amazon, right, that night there were two folks. Somebody was from Sobrato, someone else, I think it was maybe a lawyer from Amazon.
John Sobrato was there
say-
from Sobrato.
But to say, if you do not adhere to our proposal tonight, right, that's pressure. To me, that sounds like a threat. And the city went along with it and said, okay. Now, what the motives were for the city, I'm not certain. But I think, again, this situation is just layered with issues. Like, is it okay for a tech company and their, whoever's in their sphere of influence to threaten, to get their way? Like,
Threaten to walk away?
Threatened to leave the city, yes, with a time constraint on it, saying if you don't decide tonight, we're out, right? We're leaving to another city.
Well, I would like to say that this is not something new. That has happened before in the city when we first started doing the redevelopment. Now redevelopment is gone, we don't have it anymore, but we still have programs and things in place that we have to adhere to. But that happened with D. And D. was a developer that wanted to build where the hotel was at. And they wanted all of these things, and the existing leaders we had at that time didn't want to agree with the developer, and they're not here. Sun Microsystem, they were another one. They went across the street where Facebook is at right now. Okay, so this has happened. We have different leaders over the years. We've had different leaders. Now we have this group of leaders we had did not stand up to them, but the past leaders did. So I think, and the community helped the leaders. The community helped the leaders when we had the we did an event. We had to have IKEA put on the ballot because it was upset the community. So we had to put that on the ballot.
So
and the community came out and voted over to have
I have a
IKEA.
question for you, Elizabeth.
So what I want to say though is that that is not new. Our
That
council
negotiation
today,
strategy is not new.
Yes.
our council
But-
today could have done something.
Yes, but the
That's my
question
point.
the
But they
question
chose-
is, you mentioned the developer that wasn't allowed to develop where the Four Seasons is, and you mentioned the fact that Sun Microsystems went to
Menlo
the
Park.
Facebook location.
That was some
Now,
reasons.
wait a moment. The question is, how do we know those decisions did not hurt the city of East Palo Alto?
It didn't hurt because look what we got. We got
But wait a moment. For years, the city's economic position has been the lowest in San Mateo County. So how do we know, yes, the city did not react the way it did with Amazon, but how do we know there wasn't a price to pay?
Well-
and was it a price that the city would pay again? Or was it a price that was
remember,
worth
it was
paying?
East Palo Alto initiated the redevelopment, and so we needed to have that tax base, and they did not want to. I remember the things they didn't want to do. They didn't want not to give us community benefits. Didn't want us to have union jobs. We had to fight for that. Our community stood up and fight for that. I went to meetings saying, "Oh, we want these jobs to be union jobs."
When you said they didn't
You know,
want to give
the
us...
developers. And so they had a reason. The leaders back there had a good reason, saying, "Okay, we can sit here and wait until we get the developers that's going to give us what our community want." And that support came from the community. So I think one of the things that our existing council member didn't do is rely on the community for the support. Like she's saying, I mean, if we had known, we could have came out there and support that.
Okay, now we've talked about some of the reasons the city residents have not liked the agreement, but where are we now? Job Train was selected to oversee the employment office right now in Amazon. The community has been having several meetings to talk about what it wants. So where are we now? Given the givens.
I would say that we are in the very best place. And from that perspective, by that I mean, we are now getting to shape what that space will be and getting to offer insights into exactly the kind of training and development that we'd like to see, right? Now, arguably, these conversations potentially could have happened months ago, but what I know about any relationship with any company is that relationships are built over time through familiarity. And my perspective today is that we've got an open door to create a partnership that works. And I think it is now up to us as city residents to be clear about what it is that we need and to also be good partners in helping to bring it to life.
Kyra, Do you agree that maybe everyone is at the best possible moment and is primely situated for a healthy partnership? Long breath.
I think I would say I'm not sure, given the way in which Amazon came into the city for this second leg of development. They were already in the city in the same plaza as Four Seasons, but I think the history of a relationship informs or can influence what the relationship consist of, right? So if we start on this foot of a threat, if we start on this foot of your community is not qualified, if we start on this foot of I want to be in your city, but I don't want to hire from within your city, to me that that is a breach that will probably take a while to mend in that relationship.
But is it in the process of being mended? So you feel the relationship didn't get off on a good footing.
Correct.
But does that mean the future has to be shaped by the past?
No.
It doesn't, but I think we need to have honest conversations with whomever the power brokers are. So city council, developers, community members, nonprofit leadership at times, about what transpired, how to fix it, right? And then where we're headed. And if we can't do that, then I'm not really sure what the relationship will look like moving forward.
Well, I certainly think, I like to think positive about it. I think we got off on the wrong foot, so to speak, but I think we can make something out of this.
Absolutely.
I mean, the city council has said, okay, we're going to do this unemployment office, and they had they had a meeting. I think it was only one meeting, pulling the group together, pulling the community together to get their input on what we want to see at this employment center. I think that's a great opportunity to get out there and write it up and send it in. Everybody should write up something and say, I want to see this. I already did it, but we can still, those people who hadn't did that, they know, they are aware of us now. They know we out here. They know we're not going to let anybody off the hook about our first source sign program and our community benefits. So they know we're watching them. So what we need to do is get on board with that. Whatever there, we got 10 years, that's a 10-year contract. So our city council they're going to hold our city council feet to the fire if we don't do that, honor that contract. So we don't want that to happen. I certainly don't. So the best thing for the community to do is to get on board, come to those meetings, and make sure we shape that unemployment the way we want it, and ask for more. Ask for training, tech training, starting with Ravenswood School District.
I'm sorry. It's important for me to just make sure that we are honest in our storytelling, all of us, right? I do not believe that there was ever a moment where Amazon said, I want to be in your city, but I do not want to hire you. I don't think that that's true. I think
that's the message that they send when you flat out say East Palo Alto is not qualified. Was there a survey that was administered? I know people that I went to school with who went to school for software engineering who are from the community.
Well, but again, what evidence do we have that they said East Palo Alto is not qualified?
Was it in the agreement itself? I mean, was it implied in the agreement where they did not adhere to 30% hiring?
The agreement, as I understand it and as I have reviewed,
$1 million
essentially
to the city council, which we have not mentioned either.
We will. I was about to ask about it.
No, what I understand from the agreement is we will still make best efforts to hire from the city of East Palo Alto. And in addition, and just in case we fail, we want to build this employment resource center that helps get more people on the freeway.
When you say we, you're interpreting that as Amazon talking.
Correct.
We, okay, want to do that. Now, the criticism came up that only $1 million, over a 10-year period?
over 10 years.
That 1 million was over.
And one employee.
It's essentially an
it one
estimate of
employee?
$150,000 a year for 10 years.
For
so
one
about
em-
$1.5 million.
For one employee.
And members of the community, like Kyra, said that's inadequate, right?
I think that I'm still trying to understand the role that the $1 million played, right? Was that an act of charity, right? Was that in lieu of sidestepping the first source hiring policy? Where is that money going? So for me, there's still some clarification to be had, I would say, from the actors. I should not have to sit here and try to piece together, right, what Amazon meant or the message that they're sending, right? They should be able to come out and say that. If it's, oh, you know, we appeared to sidestep this policy, however, now we are committed to trying because of all the criticism we have faced. I have not heard that from Amazon. Also, the tech company gets a lot of criticism from so many directions about the lack of diversity. Well, you have a tech company with a 1,300, person job pool. You have this this community of color that is self-governed, right? And so to me, that looks like the prime opportunity and intersection to start to really put a dent in some of that criticism of the tech industry.
Well, I think what Amazon and Sabrata had in mind, they want to get up and running. As a businesswoman myself, I know how that works. You want to get up and you want to run and get your business going and running and get yourself on the feet and start making money. So they want to start out like that, and that's okay. But you don't leave the community, step aside the community. You say, okay, and I think they attempt to do that with the unemployment office. But we want the tech jobs. We need training for those tech jobs. Our students, our kids need that, our young people. So I think that would have settled it. For me, it might not have been for anybody else, but for me, that would have settled. Acknowledge
Yes.
that our community want to be tech. A lot of the young people today, that's what they do. They are into the tech jobs.
Yeah.
So you gotta work for what's here, what's present, and what's in the future. The kids are what we gotta look for. They
Regina.
like those jobs.
Well, to answer your original question, which was, is $1 million over 10 years adequate? I think the answer to that is a resounding no. I think the original idea was that they would have a employment coordinator that would be matching talent in the city with opportunities in tech, be they opportunities
Was it just in
Amazon
tech or opportunities?
could have been broader than tech, but it was clear that it wasn't just opportunities at Amazon. It was a much broader ecosystem, and I think that potentially for that mission, that's an adequate investment. But when we start talking about training and development and giving people skills, and these are technical skills are not skills, as you mentioned, that they're not grown overnight, right? There's a deep investment in getting up to speed on how to do what our software teams are doing to ship products in all of these tech companies. I guess the point there is when you're talking about redevelopment and training, the investment has to be much higher. I would say over 10 years, it would probably be 10x
yes.
that.
Now, Kyra brought up a point, and that was the lack of diversity in the industry in general. Mm-hmm. And we had talked about, does the past necessarily, how much does it influence the future? Mm-hmm. But when you look at the fact that engineers are being pulled in from other areas of the
Globally,
world,
yes.
There seems to be a lack of investment right here in young people in our country. And there is that history of a lack of diversity where across the board, Reverend Jesse Jackson has pointed out that we need to have more qualified women and people of color in these tech industries. So what evidence, just looking at that, what evidence do we have that there was the good faith and the best of intentions, and there will be that going forward?
Good faith to increase diversity.
Good faith in terms of the hiring of qualified people from East Palo Alto.
Well, you got to start with the training. It doesn't happen. The people that they're hiring been doing it for years. They start when they're little, kids in school, and they learn how to do those tech jobs. And East Palo Alto people can learn to do those tech jobs too. But there has to be some training somewhere.
Okay,
And it
now,
has to start there, and the industry has to, for underserved communities like East Palo Alto, the industry has to come to those schools. They cannot expect the parents to put in all of their funds for the kids to know how to do this job, so when they get grown up, they can go and do some jobs. They need some support. That used to happen in when I grew up. I went to Job Corps, and I went to shatter a company. That was part of my job. I was a 2-year program, industrial technology, and I went there and I learned to do those jobs. So when I got out, I can go to college or I can go to a tech school, some other kind of school. But it starts right there. And so these countries that are having these people, you know they qualify because they went to school for it. So I say the good faith effort and the community need to do that. We need to say it has to be in the training. We'll get those kids. We'll get them.
now,
Let's start
Kyra,
training.
I see you want to say something, so maybe I don't have to ask you the question I'm asking.
I was going to say a model that I have heard about and started researching is Howard University is partnering directly with Google, and they've
In Mountain View.
They've created a pipeline program for Howard University students who are in tech and also some other fields to create a direct pipeline from the university, which is a university of color, right, to address the lack of tech, the lack of diversity in tech, issue. And so when you ask me where do I think we are headed, I think that is a prime example of the types of things that can be done in a community when all the parties involved are serious. And if they're not serious, then sometimes it takes the activist, right, to come and apply that pressure so that we can see justice across the board. We talk a lot about a tax base for a community, but how does that money translate into the pockets of low-income families so as to not stay low income forever, right? We talk about the tax base of a city, but what about the income of a people, so that we don't have to always have these conversations around tech companies, right, giving us money or always considering us? Is there ever a point at which, we climb the ladder, so to speak, or we, just don't stay low income forever? So I think there's another level to this conversation that we have not even scratched the surface of.
I could think of, yes, there is a but. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, I was gonna say, but we'll see how far Amazon gets, and if Amazon and other incoming tech companies are really ready to have those very serious conversations, because there's a point at which even charity becomes questionable, and we have to start asking, what does justice really look like?
Well, I think too there has to be a time frame, because right now, as you bring in more and more tech workers, they have to live someplace, and they want to live as close to their work as possible, and that means the prices are skyrocketing, as they are in the community. The people who are now here are being forced out because of rising prices. So, and there's gentrification going on.
You're
talking about community residents, current community residents
who are renting.
Yes, who cannot afford to buy. Like even some tech workers can't even afford to buy. Those in San Francisco can't afford to buy. And they're now the commuters coming from Stockton and Sacramento. So we're talking about issues like that. So what's the time frame? You mentioned that there are conversations that are ongoing. Job Train had a community meeting. What's the result? Where
and
are
also in
things
addition
now?
to this, what expectations are realistic, right? For example, we talked about Google, and I think Google is definitely leading in this area, but Google is headquartered here. So the actions that they're going to take when their center of gravity is right here would be different than Amazon, which is headquartered in Seattle, right? So for Amazon, who has over 100,000 employees, and not to defend them in any way, but they've got over 100,000 employees. We're talking about 1,000 of them being in the city of East Palo Alto. And to be fair to them, there are some philanthropic things that they are doing closer to their center of gravity in Seattle.
So I have a question for you. Since you raised that issue, how responsive can or should a company be to a community in which it's entering, regardless of where it's headquartered?
Well, so for me, this gets down to conscious capitalism and the some of the decisions that we make in our quest to earn money, right? In both Amazon and Google's case, and Facebook's case, and eBay's case, every company that's out there that's public. First and foremost, they're answering to their shareholders that are very profit-driven, right? And so there are plenty of companies who are choosing to either operate as private companies or choosing to be selective about who they allow to invest in them based on the values that they embody as a company and the decisions that they know they're going to make based on those values, right? But for publicly held companies, indeed, their first responsibility is to the shareholders whose monies they are operating using.
So we need to all become shareholders?
No, I'm not saying.
No,
I'm not saying that.
No, I'm not saying you're saying that, but I'm thinking that's one thing we could consider. So we can have a say as shareholders, as stockholders in the companies.
Well, in my experience, companies, big companies, they do community reinvestment. It's a responsibility to do community reinvestment. And I think that company, if it's new to an area, you go and find out what the needs are in that community, and you support that community. That's how a lot of these companies, that's what they do. They find something. Facebook is doing it. They're new to Menlo Park, but they're reaching out to the surrounding communities.
It's not necessarily.
It may not be enough.
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is when Facebook first moved in, there was a lot of community pressure,
of course,
for them to be responsive to the community. So they might very well be reacting.
So our
now set up programs.
We're pressuring Amazon the same way. I think that's right. We have to. Everybody has to be at the table. The community has to be at the table. The leaders got to be at the table. The companies has to be at the table, and you got to show that concern for everyone.
And in the spirit of all of us being committed to learning and getting better at this, I would say that all of us need to lean forward to that learning, right? Because as they are learning about the specific needs of our city, we are also learning about how to make effective partnerships like this really work for a lifetime. And I think as long as we're all committed to learning and adjusting our behaviors with more knowledge and more insight, I can't see that we can't be the model for how to do this right globally.
Well, do you know, you mentioned leaning. We need to lean in. And of course, I think of that book, Lean In, Women Work, and the Will to Lead. So everyone here is leaning in.
Absolutely.
Kyra.
So for me, my concern is whether or not communities of color, such as East Palo Alto, will eventually die out, fizzle out, become extinct.
No,
right?
they won't.
Because of the presence of tech companies, right? So let's
Just
take
the community as a community, but not the people of color. The people of color will exist, but will they exist in their current communities?
Correct. Or will they all be in Stockton and Sacramento and other places, right? So a lot of folks I know are organizing around this concept of development without displacement. And they're finding identity and, community within the community that they grow up in, such as in East Palo Alto, such as Watts, Los Angeles, right? And so how do we, because some people will say like, oh, well, you're a critic and like you don't want your community to be improved. I'm saying look at how when a community is improved, the property values go up, right? Or certain people are pushed out. So my hope is that communities of color don't continue to shrink in the Bay Area, all for the sake of the tech companies' expansion, right? Because what about culture? What about family? What about history? What about place?
No, that is not necessarily a concern for the corporations. The question is, how does a community influence a corporation to have that as a concern? To go to its stockholders, okay, there is profit motive, but how then do you say this is good for your profit? So is that the concern? I mean, would that be a strategy? Because if you're going to influence the corporation, to tell the corporation how this is going to be good for business and positively impact its bottom line. So it's good for everybody.
Well,
I think that's a possibility, right? We talk about the innovation of Silicon Valley all the time, right? And so part of me feels like I want to know the values which run some of these corporations, because if I know that, then I can weigh that against my community's values, and I can decide if I'm okay with this company being here and setting up shop or I'm not. But when you get into the values conversation, that's where I feel like folks tend to get polarized. But I think that's a larger conversation.
How do you influence those values? I mean, the value.
That's a good point, but is that my job?
Value is
That's all of our
profit making.
Right.
And so how do you influence these companies to be socially responsible?
That's
to
a great
care about the
question.
community, about the air,
That's
about
a
the
great,
water,
that's
about
a great
the people.
question, and I don't think that communities are always innately, bent towards that. I think there are things such as environmental impact reports that make these companies, even if it's for 5 minutes or a month, think about their presence and the impact that they are having. Now, I hope that it moves to a place of corporations acting in manners of social responsibility, but that's beyond charity, right? That's also reallocating justice. But if that's not your focus as a corporation and you're like, I'm all about the money, then be honest about what that is, and then I can make my decision about what I'm gonna do, right? Or how I'm gonna respond, or how I even feel about this whole thing.
Elizabeth, I hear you sitting there.
Well, companies are driven by money. They want to make a profit. So our job in the community, we make policies. We find the needs and we come up with some policies and present them, take them to the table and present them to those companies and see how they respond. If they want to be good neighbors, they will support some of those policies or help us develop those policies. So that's what we got to start at. We got to start with making good policies that the company could live with and the community could live with.
Yeah, I mean, my thinking also is how can we exercise our influence to affect those who are driving the profitability for the company? For example, without disclosing political beliefs or affiliations, I will share the observation that I witnessed very clearly with respect to Melania Trump's shoes being carried at Nordstrom, right? It was a whole national thing, right? Do not buy these shoes. We want them to be delisted from Nordstrom as an option, right? And enough
Ivanka's shoes too?
Melania's. It was the daughter's.
Ivanka.
Ivanka.
Melania's
I'm sorry,
the wife.
Ivanka. You're right. I'm so sorry.
No, that's
You're
fine.
right. Thank
She's
you.
in the Trump family.
you.
We had the right family.
Thank you for that correction. I so needed it.
No.
But the point there is that the consumers spoke and the company acted because it was affecting their bottom line.
Yes.
And so how do we drive a message to create that level of commitment to social responsibility in a way that consumers who are consuming the products and services of these companies speak out, right? And I think that's a real charge and a mission of ours, and I think that it's one that we can work on.
Well, it's certainly one that's underway, given the response that the community has made already to the agreement, saying that, you know, we were excluded, we want to be included, we want to have a say going forward in terms of what's happening. So it's not that this community has been quiet. So it's like,
Correct.
where are we left? Where are we left? What can be expected?
I agree with what Ms. Elizabeth said regarding policy. I think it is going to take policy on the part of the corporation, the tech industry, whichever corporations come into the city, and also policy on the part of the city government. And I think together there can be some strides made that won't be repeats of some of the things that we're sitting here discussing right now. But I think it takes both sides, and I think it takes vision, and I think it takes everyone feeling like an equal stakeholder in the process, that they can have a say, you know, in their community. Imagine that, right?
Well, it seems everyone is having a say in the community. And we started with this book, Leaning In. So we're all leaning into what the important issues are. And a beginning has been taken.
Yeah.
And so I want to thank you. I know you want to say something, but I want to thank you all for sharing your perspective on this issue. And I'd like to thank our viewers for watching. Until next time. So, Elizabeth, you were going to say.